David Cowen with Careers and the Business of Law. My special guest today is Ed Gill from KPMG. Ed is a partner at KPMG's UK Legal Managed Services practice based in Hersham. If you don't know Hersham, it's near Weybridge. And if you don't know Weybridge, it's about 45 minutes outside of London. Ed's background is interesting to me because he's very cross-industry. He came through digital transformation, not purely law, although he is absolutely a lawyer. So he's got that business JD background. And we're going to be talking about the way we work. How do we work now that's so different? How is that changing outcomes? How is that changing the delivery of legal services, the procurement of legal services, and our careers, as it were? And so with that, Ed, thank you so much for joining me. How's the weather outside London today?
Well, for the first time since I think New Year's Eve, it's not raining, so I'll take that as a positive. Thanks for having me on. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller.
You're the best, man. Thank you so much. We're talking about, we're going to riff a little bit. We're going to talk about Clayton Christensen and the Innovator's Dilemma. We're going to talk about Mike Maples, Living in the Future, and Pattern Breakers. We'll probably do a little Jim Collins and the Flywheel with Radical Curiosity. But let's get started with what, so many people are consumed with, and then we'll get into a typical day in your main responsibilities, which is, KPMG is one of the largest law firms in the world. And I don't really want to talk about the law firm per se, but I do want to talk about the delivery of legal services and how things are changing in the delivery and the procurement. And so talk to us just a little bit about the largest law firm in the world and your role and what you and your team really deliver to the GC and the GCs you interact with.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think one of the reasons why I joined KPMG was that multidisciplinary capability. So I've always been most interested in the business of law rather than the practice of law. And, I think if I look back over my career, the challenges that legal teams, in-house legal teams have typically faced is because they've operated in a silo. And, I think one of the things that we can bring to the table and what excites me is the fact that actually, the legal teams actually play a fundamental part in the success of a business. If you take contracts, for example, they are the lifeblood of any organization. Outside of taxes and fines, everything you buy, everything you sell is governed by a contract. And so, legal teams who have an outsized involvement in the creation of those actually can have a really positive impact on the health of the business. So bringing together those different capabilities and connecting legal from its kind of silo on its own and sort of connecting them with commercial teams, with procurement teams, with the finance operations, that's where I think you can have really transformative impact. So I'm really excited about what we're doing. I'm a partner in, as you say, the UK firm. Our team focuses on legal business services. So for clients that need help, we help them to build out what their target operating model can look like. What are the right ways of running their organization, recognizing their involvement across the business? Obviously that involves a technology angle, especially because of the impact of AI. And we help to select and implement the technologies and also recognize that a big part of any successful implementation is, how is it used and what are the assets that go along with it? And then finally, for those who are more interested in kind of an outcome, this is where we can provide managed services. So, I think of that a little bit like on a Friday after work, you might fancy a burger. You could go to the supermarket and buy all the ingredients and make it, or you could get on Deliveroo or whatever the local equivalent is and buy, one from a restaurant local to you.
Let's break it down and let's break it down like we're talking to high school students for a minute, right? Let's use, Ford's assembly line. And let's see if we can get some parallel here to help break this down a little bit, because there are a lot of moving pieces, right? What are the moving pieces? The moving pieces are the key three, right? People, process, technology. Technology has enabled us to do things that we could never do before. We all know that. But see if we can break it down a little bit. So if this was a Ford assembly line, once upon a time, the car was put together in a bespoke, individual, way. It was time consuming, and you could only do one, like whatever it was, every 12 hours, make a car. And then it became tools and technology made it 90 minutes. And now we can do that, obviously, in just minutes. How does the business of law and getting into these contracts sort of fit along that parallel? Can you get that parallel for me in some way? What's the tool and or technology, right? Let me go there. Maybe that streamlines it. So once upon a time, there was no hydraulics, there was no assembly line, it didn't move through. And today we have, you can call it Lagora, you can call it Harvey, you can call it Spellbook, you can call it any one of the contract AI tools. Pick one that says, hey, this is really a game changer. How do you want to play that?
So I think maybe take a slightly contrarian approach. I
Okay.
think we have as a um, as a profession, we've been relatively slow, if not very slow, to embrace technology. And you go right back to when I started my legal career, which obviously dates me, but there was one computer in the entire office, and email was not really in use. It was all hard copy, it was printed materials, and it was letters. And then we start to move into the internet-based world where we've got emails, etc., and they helped us to be a little bit more efficient. But throughout my career, I've been involved in these points where we think that technology is going to have an outsized impact in the way in which we deliver legal services, and it has that potential. But the companies that have succeeded are those that recognize that actually, going through back to that 3 points you said of the people, the process, and the technology, the ones that fail are the ones that start with the technology, always. Because they are trying to buy based on features and functions without really understanding what are they trying to achieve and what are the outcomes. And, especially now where there's this plethora of different AI enabled tools and a lot of promises and shiny demos. And, frankly, the tools are exciting and very capable. But if you don't really know how you want to use them, it's hard to see how it's going to have that transformative impact that you mentioned. So I think it's
Yeah.
really about going back to first principles, which is the reason why Ford were so game changing in the way in which they created cars is they went back to the process and they figured out what are all the process steps that they need to go through. And then they thought about what is the delivery model. And obviously, people were at the heart of that, and the machines, how do they combine the two? And then they figured out, okay, what is the technology that will enable that to go quicker, faster, and more efficiently? So I think it's less around a specific product. And, they're all great in different ways. And in some ways, you're not going to go wrong for buying any of them. But if you want to change your business, you've got to go back and think about how are you going to drive the machinery through the factory before you figure out what is the tooling that's going to help you to do it faster.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I spent the weekend I spent the weekend taking Claude for a test drive, right? So the umbrella that I'm talking about here is, try again. If at first you don't succeed, try again. So like whatever you've been doing, if you went with technology first and that didn't work out for you, as you say, it's great. If you don't try again. So I've been working with chat for since it came out, right? So I'm a 3 year, love it, it's comfortable, and I'm hearing all about a tool, right? But I've got some pilot time, right? I've got like 4 or 5,000 hours of time, as Malcolm Gladwell would say, the first to 10,000 hours wins, because that's what it takes to be an expert or a guru, if you will. So I've got my several thousands of hours, but I take Claude for a test drive and I'm like amazed at what it can do. Really,
Mhm.
it's remarkable without getting all into that. But without those 4,000 hours with chat, I wouldn't have been able to take Claude for a test drive. And so there are new tools and technology coming in. And so it is the talent, right? So I'm a little bit further along. I've got a little bit more experience. I suspect that you must be working with GCs and CLOs and, firm-wide directors of legal operations and legal chief strategy officers that they've got 1,000 or 2 or 5,000 hours of experience. And when you walk in the door, they see you coming and going, aha, talent, aha, experience. Is that happening? Are you recognized? Do they recognize you and your team differently? Some do, some don't. How do you frame that up, Ed?
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point. And you absolutely have some who have 1,000 hours under their belt, and some have got 4,000 hours under their belt, but others probably have 100 hours or maybe 50, because the speed of change, particularly in AI, is, mind-boggling. And one of the challenges with us lawyers is we kind of self-select into the profession. We've got a high bar of quality that any tool has to hit. And so many of us tried using ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini more recently, and it was a little underwhelming. We had the press with the lawyer who had citations that didn't exist, and we've all seen the apocryphal stories about hallucinations. And so and a lot of us lawyers kind of looked at that and thought, well, it doesn't really do what I need. It promises a lot, but it underwhelms, and therefore they kind of put it away. And do you know what? In the last 6 months, the quality that has come out and the potential, particularly with an agentic future, means that they really need to go back and not just sort of look at the free models that are available, but even the $20 a month paid models, they are really changing the game. I think I read recently that the most recent version of Claude was built by Claude. And so, if you're at a point where the AI is actually building its own future, then it's not to say that lawyers will go away and the need for lawyers will go away entirely. But, you know, to use your Ford motor car analogy, we probably had 100 people building the car initially, and maybe it gets down to five or 10 or even one. And it's not that all lawyers will go away in total, but I think we'll need fewer. And I think they'll be acting as conductors of the orchestra rather than actual players of instruments as it goes through the hopper.
Yeah, can you say a little bit more about that? The conductors of the orchestra. I've heard that before. I like that analogy. Can you tell us about one or two of your clients, without naming names? They're all in. They get it. They're evangelists. They're drinking the Kool-Aid and they're producing.
I think, well, we're working with a client at the moment, an international company, and their business is at an exciting pivot point. Um, what's really great is when we started the conversations with them, they were already joined up. So this is on the sourcing side of the business, and you had a general counsel and senior procurement leaders who had already got around the table and recognized that actually, what they're trying to achieve is a business problem. And legal is a stakeholder, procurement's a stakeholder, the front office is a stakeholder, and they've all got parts to play. So they already got themselves around the table to say, actually, we need to figure out a better mousetrap. And then as a result, they could actually challenge each other to be a little bit more forward leaning. And so one of the challenges that they've put to us is to help them to build an operating model that allows them to effectively halve the number of contracts they do a year. So I think they do in the order of about 12,000 contracts a year. They want to do about 5,000 in the future, because what they want to do is to simplify and standardize as much as possible and actually kind of build the swim lanes. So again, going back to, this is less about the technology and more around getting everyone around the table and saying, well, what's our risk appetite? If it's an NDA or a thing that we've never ever litigated on before, then do we need as much white glove service? Do we need to gold plate everything, or is good enough good enough? And that's where, as you then figure out the optimum model, you can then layer on the technologies and especially, these upcoming agentic capabilities. Because if it doesn't need gold plating, you can do it pretty much all, even today, automate it all. So the low value, low risk activities, automate it all. And then at
So
the
which
other spectrum, the most, strategic bespoke work, then maybe it's mostly humans. And then there's a combination of the mind and the machine in between, where it's, again, that point of, maybe it's AI agents that are doing more of the work, and maybe there's dozens of these agents doing the same thing in parallel because they can do a maker checker and review each other's homework, and then the lawyer's just sitting over the top. They hold the pen when it comes to risk, but the actual kind of work, the grunt work, is happening by the machines. So that orchestration is the lawyer who's helping to figure out how do we educate the tools to be able to do the job, and how do we check their homework to make sure they're doing it in the right way.
So if we break that down a little bit, right, for those that are trying to follow along, depending on whether you're at level 1, 2, 3, or 4 in this conversation in your maturity, whether you've got 100 hours or 4,000 hours, I think we're still talking about people, process, and technology. You say the word model, right? You and the big four and McKinsey and Bain love models, but we're really talking about, if we break that down, it's a workflow. A
Yeah.
model is a workflow. A model is a process. So it's pretty easy to understand that. It's like, oh, it's a process. It's a workflow. This is how you bake a cake. This is how you make cookies. What if it only took, 3 steps to make the chocolate chip cookie instead of 7, right? What if we could eliminate that? I'm going to play with this for a minute and see if it hunts, right? So yesterday, right? Prior state, current state, future state. Prior state, I had to get in the car. I had to drive to the store. I had to find the chips, find the eggs, find the flour, find the other ingredients, go pay for them, put them in a bag or carry the bag, put it in my car, go back to my house and pull everything out. I don't have to do that anymore. There's a significant step that's been eliminated. It's called Instacart. I don't have to take that 20 minutes to the store, 20 minutes in the store, an hour gone. Workflow, process has been changed. That's happening in legal right now. If something used to take 10 steps, it only takes 5 steps. That's significant. And I think GCs are expecting that. So I'm riffing on that a little bit as a workflow and a process, and I'm going to bring that back around. I hope the audience is following me, and I hope you are too, because it's people, process, and technology and agents. Because you've introduced agents, and so I was using Instacart as the agent that went and did this stuff for me that brought it back that I don't have to do. I still have to crack the eggs, but I'm going to get to Betty Crocker and the Toll House cookie in a minute, where I don't even have to do that anymore. Can you just break that down from what you're doing with some of your clients, maybe this one or another one?
Yeah, I love that analogy. I haven't thought of that before because I think it kind of moves in lots of different ways. The getting in the car and going to the grocery store and getting all the ingredients and then coming home and baking the cake. If you go a step earlier, back in the day, you probably had to go to 5 or 6 different stores to get the right kind of chocolate chip and the different flour and the eggs from, wherever. And I guess sometimes us lawyers, again, going back to that gold-plated point, we feel like, that's going to be the difference between a cake that's what we want to eat. And sometimes it's right, you do need to have the best possible chocolate chips, but most of the time you don't. And actually what the supermarkets did is they kind of aggregated all of the ingredients into one location so I could go to that store. And if I think of AI agents, it's a little bit like that. I don't see the sourcing process of the supermarket. I don't see the people who are putting all the stuff on the shelves. But I know that if I go to supermarket X, it's going to have the ingredients that I need. I've trust because I bought from there and I know what they need. So AI agents are a little bit like that, where they're almost like pseudo employees, where we can get them to do things as if they are employees, but a little bit like if you hired 20 brilliant lawyers into your legal team, but your legal team's a mess, you can't expect them to do great things. But if you go through the time, take the time to figure out what is the optimal way of our team operating, and then you drop in the 20 brilliant lawyers, they are going to do amazing things. And so I think there's a combination of the traditional technologies, the workflow that you mentioned, which is both process, but also enabling the process to happen in real time. That makes the difference. And then the AI is a combination of tools that help people to be better, but also help us to have these AI agents that actually sit as, almost like employees in our team. And the thing is, unlike employees, they don't sleep. You can spin up as many as you need, and you can get rid of them. I'm running an M&A project for a client at the moment, a big international bank, and we're running some of these AI tools, what we call personas. Commercial lawyers who are responsible in this transaction for will upload the contract and they'll extract the key clauses from the contract verbatim. And then they'll help us create a risk framework so we can review what is the impact of this contract on the engagement. And we're using that rinse and repeat, you know, couple of hundred times for this engagement, and then we'll get rid of it. And we don't need it anymore, and we'll spin up something, a slightly different version for another client. But these are tools that you can have at your fingertips. And this is where that kind of orchestration conductor type element comes in, because us lawyers are going to move away from going into the opening the contract, taking time to find clause 3.2.1b, cutting and pasting that into an Excel spreadsheet. The tools will do that for us. We'll go through and just check its homework and make sure it's done it the right way.
Amy Sellers, a number of years ago, was the keynote or one of the kickoff speakers at Solid West in San Francisco. She coined the phrase, I mean, maybe it's been said elsewhere, called R&D for free. And she challenged everybody in the room. She was the head of innovation at a major U.S. corporation. She challenged every sponsor and vendor in the room to offer her R&D for free, and if it worked out, she would sign a contract with them. And she was taken up. I mean, she took up, and I think she did 6 deals with vendors in the room. What are your thoughts on R&D for free right now? How does that fit into the KPMG model, where you're like, fine, take us for a test drive. We'll do this using free very loosely, right? Like, I'm not going to pay you to come and figure this out with me, but if you do figure it out, we'll work with you. How is that working for KPMG? How is that working for others in the space as you see it? Because you're also a buyer of tools and technology, right? So you sell services, you buy tools and technology. Where does this R&D for free as a concept fit for you?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting approach, and I think if at its core, I think it's a really interesting opportunity for businesses to show what value they can bring to any client conversation. I mean, we're lucky. We're a global organization with access to the most strategic thought leaders in this space. We are working closely with the Microsofts, the Googles, the OpenAIs, and others of this world around what does the next generation of work look like. And in fact, in some ways, working with these companies, they've told us that the enterprise tools that we're developing are in some ways better than what they've got internally, because we are a professional services business. Our customers are organizations who are going through an epoch-defining transformation. So we see AI as very much intertwined with our success in the future. And so we've earmarked something like $5 billion to help build out AI capabilities and thinking for us to use in the way in which we support clients, but also for our clients to use. So, that R&D for free very much sings to what we're trying to do. I would say, there is an element of for free, i.e. we won't charge for certain aspects, but there is a quid pro quo. Every business is in business to, exist as a going concern. So there does need to be a trade-off. And what I would, encourage clients to do is think about what does the future look like for them as an organization, and how are they going to remain competitive in the future, and work with their partners, their companies, their suppliers, to help them think that through. And then as they think that through, work with those who are really going to help them to get to that future state that they want to be in. We have skills and capabilities that our clients don't have. In return, it'd be great to increase the size of wallet that we have with those companies.
Yeah. I think I don't mean to cut you off, but I think I want to touch this point. I think what's so interesting right now is that legal is in such a unique position to really lead and sit at the center of more business conversations than ever before. Why do I say that? And, I'm on the outside, and hopefully you'll riff on this as well. When you talk about contract intelligence wasn't something that was even possible before. No 1 or 100 people could put all of that intelligence together and make any sense of it, but you can now. So we have a thing called contract intelligence, which leads you to strategic decision making, which leads you to, how many more categories are there that legal now can sit in, right? Whether you're the CLO or the chief strategy officer or the legal chief AI officer or the legal chief operating officer, there's a legal CXO role that's happening and evolving and developing that I am fascinated by. Where does that what pops up for you on that in terms of categories and roles?
I think that's absolutely right, and I agree. I think, if you go back to, where have organizations tried to drive efficiency, particularly in terms of OpEx? It's been in HR, it's been in finance, it's been in IT. Those verticals have already been optimized. And legal have kind of been able to keep their head below the parapet because, I'm the arbiter of risk. I frankly keep all you guys out of jail, so you shouldn't touch my area. So, cast the eye of Sauron elsewhere. But what it's meant is, if you go back to contracts as they're a business instrument, but for whatever reason, people think of them as, legal's responsibility. I think they're the kind of the last port of opportunity for fundamental enterprise driving value. The irony is that 80% of contracts are managed outside of legal, and yet there's no chief contracts officer. So I'd love a world in which there became a chief contracts officer role, to your point. Is it the role of the general counsel? Maybe, but it kind of sits between, the chasm of procurement and legal and commercial and legal. And it's kind of like a chief data officer role. And maybe that's where actually it is at its core. It's a data play more than anything else.
Yeah,
But
these
I
are
think it was World Commerce and Contracting that they did a study, and they done one very regularly. Most recently, they've suggested that companies lose the equivalent of about 11% of their revenues every year. Interesting to me is that over the last 2 years, that number's gone up from 8.6%. We've had all these tools at our fingertips, AI enabled CLMs, all that, and yet the number's going up. And I think that's because there's just no one who's got their arms around both the creation of the contracts, the storage of the contracts, and then the management of the contracts in life. And I think that's the untapped area for an organization.
That's brilliant. It's brilliant. We've bumped up on time here, but I do want to get at least one more question in before I ask you about the tunes and the music that percolates around in the Gill household, and who's got the finger on the button there. But tell me just a little bit. You mentioned $5 billion of investment. Tell us a little bit about what the commitment is at KPMG to investing in talent. I'm constantly reading about you and the big four, right, and other consulting firms really investing, billions of dollars in people, process, and technology, but people first. Can you tell us what that means? For example, with you and your team, how are you benefiting from this investment? Like break it down, make it a little personal for the audience.
Yeah, I guess from for our team, we're very much benefiting from this investment that the firm's making. Frankly, I came in on the back of part of this investment, so the funding isn't just to build out the tools; it's also to bring in the people with the experience and, frankly, the wrinkles and the grey hairs from having tried different things over time and figuring out what works. We are absolutely growing. We're at the crest of a wave at the moment because of the transformation that's taking place, not just in legal teams, but also in procurement teams, also in the front office and commercial teams, and we're supporting that. So, we're recruiting people at all levels to help, effectively roll up their sleeves and do that engineering and that thought leadership around the workflows. What are the ingredients going to be in the future, and what are the instructions that take you through the recipe to make the cake? That's what our team's really helping focus on at the moment. And then as businesses think through what do the teams of the future look like, as I say, there's an opportunity to buy that cake rather than have to make it each time, and think about recruiting the teams, training the teams, the pastoral care, etc. So it's exciting times for us. We're looking forward to what the future's going to bring. It is going to be, I think, probably the most defining next 5 years of my career. I'm excited about that, and also, watching as all these new announcements come through, and each one changes markedly from the one before. So it's scary and exciting in equal measures.
Is there anybody that you're following right now? I follow the AI Daily Brief. I mention it on almost every episode and every podcast that this is my go-to. I don't catch 7 days a week, but boy oh boy do I catch 4 days a week. Sometimes I can only listen to the first 5 minutes of the show, but it's Nathaniel Hawthorne. It's the AI Daily Brief. I don't miss that on the long form. If I've got some time on the weekend, I listen to Peter Diamandis and his moonshots, which is like an hour and a half, and I have a hard time sort of finding that, but I am committed to it. What are you recommending to our listeners, Ed?
Yeah, so I have a much to the annoyance of my wife. I listen to a lot of podcasts normally, on my phone, so it's very tinny while I'm doing dishes or making food. So that's pretty frustrating. So I've got a very long playlist of people I listen to, but actually where I find I get most interested is a podcast called Marketing Against the Grain. Now, it might sound a bit odd for a lawyer, that's trying to transform the legal industry to be thinking about marketing, but these are guys who are from HubSpot. Originally, I'm not sure if they're both there, but it's very practical and hands-on. And I love that kind of visceral feeling about as a new release comes out, what are they doing? How are they spinning up through vibe coding these new tools and capabilities? And I think what a lot of people are missing is that practical hands-on capability. And I think that's what we're trying to do with our clients. So, I mentioned this investment. We've got this new tool called Digital Gateway. It's got AI enablement. We're trying to get these tools into the hands of our clients so that they can start to play with it. So I think they're the ones who I'm most excited about because I kind of take away some of that and then think, oh, well, how can I play that into my daily work?
So Digital Gateway, if there's anybody who's listening, you want to offer for the first caller R&D for
Absolutely. Look, anyone who's interested, hit me up and I'll explain more. I don't want to kind of sell out our wares here, but we are looking at sort of, very much on all boats rise together. So we want to help out the industry, and we think that there's a benefit to our clients. There's obviously a benefit to us if we have more people using our tools, not least because we learn more about how these tools can make a difference in practice. So yeah, it's exciting times.
Well, listen. I thoroughly enjoyed thinking out loud together with you today. What was so nice and I was looking forward to is that we really had no agenda. I didn't know where this was going to go. It's been really interesting, and it's one of the things that I love most about what I do, which is I get to have really fascinating. Well, to me, I'm a nerd. I just love conversations with interesting people that are on the cutting edge. So, Ed, thanks for taking some time. Let's finish up with if I were in the Gill household, like what's the music in the background? Who's controlling the sound vibe in the Gill house?
Yeah, well, it's definitely not me. So I think we mostly listen to music. I tend to drop off the kids to school. So we've got three kids, 8, 11, and 15, all with very different music tastes. And we kind of have a rotation system. But I feel very much responsible for, guiding them as a shepherd through the wilderness and helping them to recognize that the music died after 1999 and, all of their tastes are terrible. So for me, it's anything from about 1988 to 1990. It's the Pixies, it's The Cure, it's a bit of Britpop. And so I'm trying to lace that through as, hidden MSG that I'm sprinkling on their diets to and improve their.
I love it. So let's exit with a little Cure. What do you think?
Absolutely. Love it.
Let's let this roll for just a minute. I love this song. This is Friday I'm in Love by The Cure.
Very much played on Fridays in the car.
I don't care if Monday's blue, Tuesday's grey and Wednesday too. Thursday, I don't care about you, it's Friday, I'm in love.
I am in love with Friday. Is it my favorite day of the week? I think it is, actually. I think Friday is really not because it's the end of the week, but it's like I have so much to look forward to and I've accomplished so much on a typical Friday. How about you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, it's a bit like the spring of the week. You're all excited about rebirth and the coming of the weekend, and you're not thinking about the fact that you're an unpaid, unloved Uber driver on a Saturday as you drop your kids at the various sporting events they need to be at. So it's all the anticipation of what's to come.
Fantastic. Speaking of anticipation, close us up with, when will you be in the States? I know you're 45 minutes out of London. Will you be heading to the States anytime soon? When are we going to break bread and have a cup of coffee, Ed?
Yeah, hopefully very soon. One of the good things about working where I do is we support global clients, and as you know, global clients want to be supported globally. So I tend to be on a plane, and so next time I'm over, I'd love to break bread and grab a cleansing ale with you.
That'd be wonderful. Ed Gill, KPMG, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you on the road. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this show, be sure to give us a like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your shows. And if you want to take your career from now to next, never eat alone.